right.
Now remember, you can project. You can talk louder. Well, this is a green room. I don't give two shits. But yeah, no. Because all right, so you can see how I'm talking now. Like, you can see the physical size. Like, if I'm just talking like this, you can see how small it is. But if I start talking like this, now all of a sudden there's a slightly different, and there's not a huge difference in my inflection.
Yeah, and I still haven't figured out yet did you want to...
You just got to talk louder is all.
I guess it's actually better to sit with this setup.
Probably.
That other table would actually work really well in here.
I think it would.
Because it would bring it up to the I think that table's the perfect height.
You got to get closer to the mic.
I think that table's the perfect height.
Yeah, no.
That you
get closer to the mic and just talk normally.
That you could do either standing or sitting.
Yeah, see, you can see where I'm at talk volume.
You know what? Actually,
yeah, go ahead. No,
that's the problem. Like you're talking about, I gotta fix my ergonomics. Okay.
That's all right. Yeah. So while we're doing this, Green Room, episode 2, January 27th. This is
back to Beezy.
This is about to be. This is the pre-show to I'm Telling You, which would be episode 3, because we're one show behind on the Green Show. To I'm Telling You. Yeah, you don't want the cord on there, because then as it moves, you'll hear it. Yeah, just off to the side's fine. No, literally off to the side. Just let it hang. Because then it's not going to touch anything. It's not going to run anything. Yeah, and then you want to make sure that when you're getting yourself all up in there, that we're not using that piece of crap.
No, here,
I mean, I get it, but no, we're not going to use
all right,
that.
That's not all right. You gotta be all like that.
Oh, you do have to be like that. It's the Green Room.
All right. Actually, I like how this was before, where it was almost like, yeah,
there you go.
That's much more comfortable than it's. Okay. It's got to be really close, but not touching the screen.
Yeah, Mr. Gemini's he's doing tech checks over here on his stuff, and he's learning what positioning is and how far away. Dude, if you're chewing gum, spit that out. Otherwise, we're gonna hear you chewing away. Which, dude, I can totally hear you chewing.
It's Green Room.
Wow. I'm not saying now, just in general.
Got a receipt paper, or I don't want to just.
As a matter of fact, they do. I don't know if there's actually gum in there or not. Or if it's just trash or what, but you asked, I gave. There you go.
Dude, that's...
I don't know what that noise was. It was weird. Did anybody else hear that?
He hands me a wad of gum wrapper that looks like it could have been sitting there for 2 weeks. Oh, here we go. All right.
We're kind of limited on supplies here. My apologies. The environment does not exactly allow for better faculties.
And that's the one thing about those little chiclet style gums.
Right.
Is they don't come with their own wrapper. That's the nice thing. You always have a wrapper when you chew like Wrigley's. You got something to throw it out with. I find myself all alone. I was all by myself. No one was looking. This is just dead air. This is bad form. So anyway, while he's away... Oh, well that's lovely. 4 portraits, 1 Jesus.
That's actually a really solid book.
I'm sure it is. I just love... Well, put it right in the O. Put it right there.
that was not intentional.
All right, we're not going to talk about what's going on, but
That makes it quieter.
Yeah. So.
Okay. 4 portraits, 1 Jesus. Really good book. Really good book.
So, I don't know. You want to do the intro as far as bringing us up to date. So now I don't know that it's always going to be like this, but we are running episodes this week apparently back to back, back to Beezy. And that's me. I finally got you to agree to this, so I'm taking full advantage and getting every bit I can. Plain and simple. I'm gonna be honest. Yeah, I'm being completely guilty and selfish, or I'm completely guilty of being selfish. There you go. Let's be impeccable with our statements. But yeah, no, that's kind of where I'm at. Is I've been harassing you. I finally got you to say good. We're now just we've done enough tech checks and things of that nature. We've gone through and gotten comfortable with our banter besides just our typical back and forth as we would in any conversation. So as a whole, that's kind of where we're at now.
We had what I would call a success on the last episode. I would say
we had a great success on pretty much all of the last couple of episodes.
I mean, specifically, I mean, I know I've already talked to you a couple times about it, but there was a couple magical moments in there that honestly were very expressive of what we're trying to accomplish.
The last actual episode, not the green room, not the physical episode, about halfway through, just shy of halfway through, you had a moment where you kind of got out of your way and just let the words flow, and you let the emotions out. And yeah, I felt that completely embodied exactly what we're doing here. So much so that I really shared in that moment with you, and I felt blessed to be a part of it, and it was beautiful for me, honestly.
It was almost like a purge.
I get that.
It was almost like a purge, and then strangely enough, we kind of got a chance to compose ourselves while I was playing the footage of that.
You got a chance to compose yourself. I actually started to become slightly more emotional over it.
That was a good speech, though, wasn't it?
Excellent speech, and I'll be honest. You stating, Charlie Chaplin, Man and Machine, all that. I did not recall it as such, so I made a statement of, I have no idea what this is. I have seen that speech before. I would say I've heard parts of that speech. I didn't necessarily see it. Although I'm sure the iconic pictures, because those of you who haven't seen it, it was Charlie Chaplin basically dressed as Hitler.
Well, actually,
he had the stash on because that was the Charlie Chaplin stash.
I'm a new fan of Paolo Nutini, who's like a Scottish, I guess some kind of like a soul bluesy singer, I guess, of sorts. I just started listening to him recently. I guess he's been out for a number of years now, but he actually at the end of one of his tracks has a section of that playing. So that's, it's something. Okay. And it's also, I was trying to think of where it came from, but it's also, all right, this is one of the things I wanted to get into last time that I felt like we touched on, and it was, what was it? The question you asked me as to where that came from specifically. Wasn't that the question? You were asking where the...
I was asking you from inside of yourself, where did that come from? I believe was my more specific question.
But there was something in relation to that particular speech, and like what went on in my mind to have.
Well, right. That's what that was my thing. Is I was asking you because so you made the statement of, it was like I kind of got out of my own way, like it just all of a sudden it just started happening, like it was just flowing out of me, you're like I almost kind of like blacked out for a second, and I equated that to the scene in Old School where Will Ferrell does the debate and he's like, what happened? I totally blacked out.
Yeah.
It's just like, wait, what? But
that was a funny reference, yeah.
But that's kind of how that's what popped into my head when you said that, and
yeah.
my statement to you was like, it's almost like you're getting out of your own way, which I think is what made that very, very beautiful. But yeah, so
and none of that, and that's the whole thing. Like none of that was planned. I didn't know going into it, but I could feel it coming on. Like
organic.
When it started to, I mean, you can hear it in my voice when I listen to it again. There's like a build up going on, and there's a point where you must have known to step back, because there was a point where it's like, okay, he's going off now.
And re-listening to it, because I've listened to it a few times now, re-listening to it, yeah, there was definitely a moment, one, where I could hear your tone increase, and simultaneously as that was happening, there also seemed to be, what seemed to be like a tear coming out of the one corner of your eye. Not like, crying, but literally just... what is it? Wellowing up or whatever? What's that phrase? Right? Welling up. It
just started watering.
Because you didn't cry per se, but you could tell that there was a physical, emotional response.
It was like Sinead O'Connor singing "Nothing Compares to You."
Oh God. No,
Sorry,
that's not what that was. Not even a little bit.
Dude, it's a great song. Shut up.
I'm saying you, not her.
Anyhow, so
But yeah, so that was more of my statement to you, or question to you was, what inside of you caused that? Like, what part of you, or like, because even if you're saying that just came out of me, so it's not you per se, cool. But if it was, then
that's kind of what I wanted to get back to. And I know this is just green room, so it's not like we have to cover everything now. It's just something to touch base on. So thinking about that, where I wanted to go with it, I said, I think as far as I went was, I said, I think it's been about 2 years now that I've been on this kind of quest.
Your deeper spiritual journey.
Yeah, and I didn't really break down much further because I think went off on another tangent right after that. But
yeah, we started to get a little bit more serious, and that's kind of where I was like, all right, this seems to be the spot where it's like when we get into serious mode, green room's basically over. It's like, all right, let's actually turn the mic on.
And you may be familiar of the time when it started to happen for me, because I changed my diet.
Well, yeah,
slowly but drastically.
Because I found that, when you told me that you were going basically vegan and like dairy free and all that kind of stuff, changing your diet.
Dairy light now.
Well, right, but I found it almost ironic because when we were younger, I was the strict vegetarian where I was almost vegan for like 18 years.
Until really just more recently that you become more omnivorous.
2012. Wait, no. 2015.
Okay.
2015 was the year that I started eating meat again. Because it was like 97 where I had started to become, the vegetarian. So yeah, that was about 18 years. So it was 2015, the summer of, when I was just like, I'm now going to start to eat meat. Not as a mass consumption, but, I'm going to allow it back into my diet. And I did.
So anyway, just to
so you're 2-year journey, right?
Try and get this thought out that I don't want to sidetrack too much. The diet was a big thing for me. The diet still is a big thing for me, but it was a stepping stone. The other thing is the journal, which started right around the same time. The first journal, the black one, which I carry with me every time I bring my bag out. Actually, did I put it back in there? Maybe I don't have it. But the writing, the introspection, and not that I think we said before, like you look at me as somebody who reads quite prolifically. I don't know if that was.
Well, yeah, I stated that while you feel I'm more learned, I said you're the more predominant reader, because in the sense that since I've known you, you've always been a reader. Like, you've just read books. I didn't really start getting into actually reading books, like full.
Like for entertainment.
I still don't read for entertainment, I'll be honest. It's purely for research and educational. Now, mind you, it's within topics that I enjoy, so it's entertaining to me, but it's really dry academia where you're using 13-syllable words. There's Latin roots, and people start scratching their head and whipping out dictionaries, and I'm like, ooh, this is really good, and I dig into it deeper.
So anyway, just to try and make this as short as possible,
that never happens.
No, it never does. But I'd like to get it all out so that maybe we can use that as a jump off point and then figure out where the conversation is going to go and start the actual episode eventually. But the 2 years ago, diet changed. It wasn't overnight. It was one thing at a time, one type of meat until there was none left.
Well, yeah, because you did it you did it in an experimental manner where you were attempting to just piece by piece wean things out to see what the difference was. Where at one point in time, that's where you're at. You're like, hey, I only removed this. I'm going to wait a month to see what happens.
Focusing on how it made me feel physically, emotionally,
Right.
I found more frequent and longer periods of clear-headedness. I found that even though I still, and now with COVID, I sleep just fine. I sleep all the time. But I mean, not run down at all, fully energized on 6 hours of sleep on general.
Good for you.
And even more so than I was when I was on a regular diet.
Right.
So like feeling more energetic, dropped like 60 pounds, not that I was really overweight to begin with, and started working out every Actually, every day at work.
Physical exercise, you mean working out?
Physical exercise. Like I would take an hour in the middle of my day at work. So before all this happened, and now I'm unemployed. This all started back when I was still working in that big, corporation.
Yeah, the conglomerate that is industry.
So full circle now, the question about the attachment to that particular speech and why that motivated me in a way to have that emotional moment, because there was a connection for me. There was always a connection with that track,
that specific speech.
I think they call it like a dictator speech or something like that. Because he starts out by saying, "I don't want to rule you." Like that's where the conversation for him, where the speech starts.
Right.
I don't want to be your dictator. I don't want to do that. And basically goes off on this. So anyway, that was one of the things when I was working out. Every time I hit the showers afterwards, I would play something that was like inspirational. Like I would try to pick something every time that was
some like Rocky stuff where you're just like coming off the endorphins high. And you're just like dun, 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 but you want to have like in a verbal manner. I get it.
And it started out with like Alan Watts, and then it became like all kinds of people out there started putting like almost like it's like really mellow music to.
Right. Yeah, there seems to be a general
different
trend.
Speeches out there, and I was like, I just, tried down a YouTube hole with all these things, and I ended up discovering all sorts of things. That's actually one of the things that got me into like reading Terence McKenna.
Yeah, when you said all that, the name that was in the back of my head was Terence McKenna, because those were some of the original ones that I had seen where they took his speeches and added animation to it, as well as the music that you were talking about. So I've seen a few versions of that, but he seems to be a very predominant component in that remix era. Of that
so anyway,
stuff.
after my workout every day, I would listen to these inspirational speeches or whatever with that just kind of really energizing mellow music to go with it. I forget what style of music it's called. It's not really important, but
probably like trance or trip hop or
whatever. It's a newer
EDM.
nomenclature.
It's going to be EDM. They just took all of electronic and
It's
made it
always
EDM.
Yeah.
Even though there's like 85,000 genres within EDM, and they all deserve their own.
Well, we had different names for it. I mean, like back in the day,
we had techno.
Like
we had
the,
techno.
The
that
new
was
stuff they talk about now, that was just drum and bass for us. That's all that was.
See, but yeah, we went from just techno, then we had drum and bass, and then all of a sudden it was like house and jungle. Then we got into hard step, and then now like there's dubstep, and dude, there's a whole electronica just.
Well, and you like EDM,
happening.
like you had that whole segment that was all like like 180 BPM or something.
Well, that's like hardstyle basically, where you took techno and double timed it. So instead of having the now you're like yeah, that stuff. And that's where the guys get into like the glow sticks and the floating ball and freaking what are the jegs or whatever. Their pants were so massively large, bell bottom wise, that you couldn't even see their feet moving. It just looked like they were floating as a giant bell of denim floating across the stage with glow stick. It's just like what I don't.
My brother used to say I could take 3 steps before you'd see my.
Oh yeah, I believe it.
Yeah,
I believe it.
Jankos,
that's what it is.
Jankos. Yeah, I had a black pair. I mean, like you could put. It was ridiculous what you could put in those back pockets.
You could park your car in your back pocket
and
go inside of the club. That's what you could do.
And like the pants were after a while so comfy and so large that you could sleep in them. It was like a freaking tent. And I remember the first time my dad saw them, he's like, that's nothing new. They're elephant bells.
Yeah.
We used to wear them back in the 70s.
Oh, yeah, dude. Those were... I mean, the only thing that would be different now is the fact that they were oversized and you wore them around your butt, not your waist.
So did we get off topic? That's always fun.
I don't know. I think we were talking about the Charlie Chaplin speech and what it was that invoked within you why you wanted to do it.
So anyway, I guess what I'm saying is we can draw that close to 2 years ago where I started getting really motivated by that speech among... a number of I mean at this I'm such an audiophile when it comes to Alan Watts, Terrence McKenna, dude, even Terrence Howard, dude. That guy's intense.
Dude, there is a great many
and Alan Watts
celebrities, you know, if you want to call them celebrities, well-known individuals, right? And when I say well-known, I mean throughout the world. We now seem to have a relative collective of these well-known individuals that aren't per se known for their intelligence. Not to say that they aren't, but they're more meant for their celebrity capacity as far as being actors or sports figures or things of that nature that actually are quite intelligent, very capable, and they just chose those professions because it's what's makes them happy. But which is great because then they have the ability to kind of meet and greet and do a lot of amazing networking so that we can get this honest information out, which I think is pretty cool. I love guys like Morgan Freeman. You said Terrence Howard. It's these are cool people. Denzel Washington's pretty dope. You hear some of his.
I don't know. I never got into Denzel like his personal stuff, but
you do. So if you watch his like commencement speeches, anytime he does like interviews, I watch a lot of that stuff because.
Well, I told you what drew me to Terrence Howard, all right? I mean,
with the original aspect, or
the thing that really blew me away was that I never knew the condition that he was born with.
The synesthesia.
The synesthesia.
Or synesthesia, yeah. Until you heard one of his speeches, which I think was like in a commencement speech or something to that effect, or he was doing.
He was actually giving a speech to a particular class. It was at Stanford or Harvard something like that. And he actually tried out his new math there, and I thought that was kind of funny because you're standing amongst a bunch of Ivy League stuffed shirts, and you're actually trying to throw this idea.
And you guys want to talk about new math?
I mean, that takes balls because that's basically like he was getting very philosophical. Is that right? That sounds like I made up word. I don't know. Whatever. He was getting
philosophical,
very philosophical about the way that we do math, and he believes it to be wrong. And it's so funny that
excuse me.
I mean, I won't even pretend to be bright enough to actually figure out what he's saying, but somehow he makes it sound convincing. I don't know.
Okay. I mean, logic usually helps with that, so whatever you're expressing, if you do it logically...
But anyway, he's interesting to listen to because it wasn't just the math thing. Like, he goes off on quite a bunch of stuff. But it was one of those things where it became a thought experiment for me. Like, you ever like to throw those around in your head? I mean, the kind of thing you think about while you're driving somewhere, long distance, or...
Well, so... When you say thought experiment, that my instant reaction was, one, my personal journey, you did it with swapping your diet and started doing some of that stuff, right? I started asking myself a lot of difficult internalized questions. The ones, as we had said, I think in the previous episode, was the idea that, hey, people ask themselves easy questions, but they usually don't ask the difficult ones. And I think I added to it was like, yeah, they may, and even though they do, sometimes they don't want to answer it, and that's the bigger problem. So it's like you can ask the question, but you also have to answer it, and you have to answer it impeccably. You have to be honest with yourself and your thoughts and expressions. So that was my reaction to that statement. Yeah, I think that's an important part of it. For me, it was, anyways. So that was how my journey started. So yeah, I did that introspection or personal self-reflection on many of things, and asked myself a lot of difficult questions,
And it's like when you go into something like that too. I mean, honestly, you don't look at it as like, well, I did it, I did my time, I'm good. It's like knowledge. Like once you start finding knowledge, and that's what I liked about our last conversation, is the whole thing about if you're after the piece of paper, you're going to get the piece of paper.
Right.
But if what you're after is the knowledge, that's where you'll have these guys, and it's like, well, why would you want to spend your entire life being a student? It's like, well,
why wouldn't you?
You are.
Kind of.
I mean, there's no way to get around that. And this is from somebody who hasn't actually gone to college. I've been to a few, but, you know.
Well, I think that was my extension on what you were saying, where I was like, hey, dude, don't go after the piece of paper unless that's what you need or want. I said you should just go to college regardless, just to take a course for the experience, to do it and say, hey, I did this. I don't care if it's remedial, basic, advanced. I do not care.
And let's not get it. It's not so I can say it, because I could give a crap
it's to be a
less
part
what
of it.
anybody else
it's
thinks.
It's to question. It's to learn.
It's what you. It's like totally honestly, it's what you take away from it. Because if you think, that's now. Like the food you eat, that is now a part of you. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah.
That knowledge now, unlike food, will remain with you forever, unchanged.
But just like food, when you have proper knowledge or information, just like when you have proper nutrition from your food, you have a better whole body.
But I mean, think about, like the term knowledge is power. It's like, when you think about it, a piece of knowledge, tiny as you could pack it, one single piece of knowledge that's really, really important to you as an individual could be life-changing, could make you think along a different line for the rest of your life from this day forward.
Which I think is one of the things I agreed about with the I'm telling you aspect of it is you and I having these organic conversations, with each other, other people, whatever. We don't know what part of that is going to do what it is that we need it to do, right? Like, we don't know where that thing's going to be or what that piece is. We're just having the conversations, putting that energy out there. You at home, or in your car, or on your bike, or walking, whatever you're doing. Like, if you're listening to this right now, we don't know what it is that's going to trigger in you. All we know is we're doing the best we can to put positive, open, organic ideas out there so that we all feel better about just expressing ourselves. And in doing that, there's going to be something that's going to resonate with you, and you're going to be positive from that. That's what we're doing. I mean, to me, that's the end all be all on that purpose, right? We're here to help ourselves, but in doing so, we know we're also going to help, even if it's just one person in this entire world, from one thing that we say, and they all of a sudden become that person that makes this world that much better of a place. That's our job, and we did it. Like,
well, and somebody could just as easily step up and say, you guys are a-holes because you never cover the important thing, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, all right, well, I mean, throw something at us, that's whatever. But the thing is, this is, being organic means it's going to come from a place where it means something for us. So if there's a conversation topic that you bring up and I'm jiving with it, like, it's not my job to control where the conversation goes.
Right, and I think we agreed on, you made this statement, not to be ego-centered. So, because you were saying that, it's difficult to have the conversation without having the ego, and I explained what the ego was, and you're like, all right, so to do it not ego-centered, meaning that you can now have your bias or your perspective, which is very important to the conversation, but you're going to be more open. So instead of being like, hey, no, I'm not going to hear this or listen, you now have that ability to, one, be open to, but also express yourself, so that we have that organic. Yeah, and not you, but everybody. I'm just speaking you specifically right now. But
we could, and now that's becoming a hang-up, the whole term ego. I mean, if we need to come out with a definition for how we use it in different contexts, well, so that's why I changed it to ego-centered, because honestly, okay.
Well, yeah,
go on.
Yeah, so I just recently heard, I reheard, you put the RE in front of it, a acronym for ego that I felt, one, doesn't have to be for everybody, but it does kind of express more what I feel ego is, because I said ego was that negative voice that, you're all pumped up and like, yo, I'm going to go do this, and your ego's like, yeah, you're going to go do it, except it's Wednesday, and it's kind of wet out, and you got that hole in your shoe, so we'll do it tomorrow, buddy. You're like, yeah, we'll do it tomorrow. You just got talked out of it. So when I heard this expression for the acronym ego, easing God out, to me that's saying I am going to ignore that divine statement of like that idea that was like, yo, I'm going to go do this today because I'm awesome. It's like, yeah, we are. And then you allow that voice to creep in. that's easing God out, or that extra higher energy, whether it be you or not, because we are our creator, or whatever you want to explain it, or your centering being. So to me, that states that little voice that's just like, not so much. So you take that first statement, usually is like, I'm awesome and I'm going to go do this. And then you go down this rabbit hole of just negativity because you don't believe in yourself.
See, that's an important thing to note, though, because like I don't necessarily, and I did correct it to more ego-centered or egocentric.
Well, yeah, to not be ego-centered or egocentric, correct.
But when I reference the term ego, realize, and this will be my best attempt at like layman for this, but
yeah, go ahead.
When we were talking about the soul making the transition from one body to another, right? When we were talking about that, and I said it's like, okay, now you're plucked out of this body, and for a moment before you go back into life again, you are connected to the everything.
Right.
There is no differentiation. You are part of one.
Well, you are part of all.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, yeah. Let's not get into mincing words over something that you really couldn't.
Well, that's what you mean. The one, and because when you use one, it sounds singular, but the one is the all or the everything, which to me just reminded me of Never-Ending Story, where you have all of it, and then you have the nothing. You have literally everything, and then one thing that is the nothing. I thought that was very ingenious, but that's what triggered in my head. So that's why I agree with you. Yes, so being a part of the one or the all, everything, like literally everything, stardust, supernovas, freaking asteroid belts, the planets, the energies around us, like you're literally a part of everything.
I mean, absolutely. There's chunks of you that are from meteorite, from Lord knows where. There might be specks of dust that landed on the Earth's surface millions of years ago that are now somehow part of your personal ecosystem.
Yeah.
It's really amazing when you think about it that way. That we're children of the stars. And then that was Neil deGrasse Tyson, I think, got on that whole kick. I thought that was kind of a neat little... He has some interesting things to say now and then. He's a pretty bright guy.
Okay, you know what? We're in the green room. I can totally tangent right now. I'm going to agree with you.
We shouldn't be for much longer. This is getting pretty lengthy, though.
Oh, but we don't know how long these are supposed to be. There is no true...
So what, does it actually have to get heated and serious for us to go, okay, cut?
Well, no, or we need the break, because it's like, okay, hey, I feel like we're warm. Because, I mean, like you said...
We're warm, yeah.
Well, because, I think you made that statement of, I would hate to get 20 minutes in and be like, crap, we only got 5 minutes. This is horrible. Let's just start over. But, yeah, so Neil, I caught a interview with him, and he was explaining water towers. Like legit water towers, why they're built the way they are with the wooden slats and all that, like the old school ones. Because what he explains is, if you look at them, and go ahead, pull this picture up if you're listening, pull up a wooden slat water tower. Now what happens is he goes into, and he has a smile on his face while he's doing it. This is the thing that cracks me up. Like, he's having a good old time talking about this. There is on the top half of the water tower one metal band that goes around it, right? Approximately, maybe 2 or 3. But then the middle section, like if you were to literally just cut the water tower from top to bottom into 3 even sections with these metal rings that go around to hold all the slats. The first one has, the top layer has like 1. But then the second layer, the middle layer, has like 2. And then the bottom layer, or, the third layer, has 3. And he goes into the physics of it, explaining what it is that water does, weight-wise, how it amplifies due to gravity as it compresses on itself. So if you looked at, say the water tower is 30 feet tall, the 10 feet at the top has a weight of like 1,500 pounds or something, right? Yeah, exactly, see? So the top weighs like 1,500 pounds. Well, the middle half also weighs 1,500 pounds plus the 1,500 on top of it, which means the middle now weighs 3,000, right? It's not 1,500 now, it's 3,000 because it's the two of them plus that. So it's actually now 4,500 just from the top to the bottom, right? And then you get to the second or the third layer and it doesn't, so it's just like, and he's going into it and explaining the math. He was like, so by the time you get to the bottom, it's actually about 60,000 and you got to have these three. And I was just like, but he had his immense smile on his face. So I think that's the thing I enjoy about him most is while
how many atmospheres of pressure are at that lowest level? You've got two rings right next to each other.
Well, that's what he's saying is because as the water carries layer after layer, so if the top layer weighs 1,500 and the middle weighs 1,500 and the bottom weighs 1,500, right? If you cut them into three like even sections.
Yeah, if this much water.
Well,
so
the middle doesn't weigh 15. It actually weighs 15 plus the 15 on top of it.
Right.
But you still have to count the 15 that's on top of it. So the 15 on the top with the 30 now in the middle is now 4,500. Right, and that's just to the middle. Now you go one more, so it's not 15 on the bottom, it's 15 plus the 15 in the middle plus the 15 on the top. What we remember is the 15 in the middle is actually 30. So it's 15 plus 30 plus, so it's, I'm like, what? Dude, the math on it was just,
so we're having this whole conversation is about a water tower, is that?
But that's exactly my point. Like, he's going into the physics, right? He's explaining the math, and he's basically, like, geeking out over it with this super huge smile. But all we're talking about is water weight.
Well, he comes with the math like this. Like,
right. Well, he used, obvious numbers so that he's like, hey, these aren't the correct numbers, but let's just say approximately, because, he's done it before, so he has the relative math on that as well. So he's like, approximately, let's just, and then and he goes through it. But it's to the degree of his knowledge, but also his exuberance, because he's just lighting up to talk about water weight in a water tower on the top of a roof. Because that's the thing is it has to be above like water, the base of it.
And it sounds like maybe he was making a comment on the ingenuity and the discovery of man's innovative spirit that we figured out how to do that over
I only
years.
caught the clip of it, so I don't know how they got onto that topic per se.
Well, you got to think about how many goddamn water towers just wouldn't stay the fuck up, Like,
yeah. Pretty much.
I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I got all the right materials.
Right.
I got Coopers working around the clock, making this giant, basically what amounts to a giant shipping barrel.
Basically.
That's basically what you're making.
Giant liquid.
And those rings you're talking about are actually Coopered rings. And good God, you got to be talking about. I would have.
Oh, it's a lot of weight, dude. It's a lot of weight. Because I think my numbers are it's like 1,500,000 gallon or 1,500,000 pounds for the
mathematics of how to figure out circumference and how
much
would actually. But you got to be talking about 30, 40 yards worth of steel in a straight line, right? How many yards do you have to go around like a decent sized water tower to get around the circumference?
Yeah, if you have like a 30-foot diameter. And then you're talking about going around the circumference of that 30-foot diameter.
Because this makes me think of...
there's an easy calculation on that. I know it's like pi times half the radius, or I forget the equation, but I know that it's a simple...
This is what we talk about in the green room when there's really nothing... Yeah, anyway.
We're geeking out about math and water towers right now because of Neil deGrasse.
Yeah. This kind of structure reminds me of something you would see in like the old Wild West.
Well, yeah, because that's how you have water pressure.
Right.
Because that's the thing is, so you take a pump to pump all the water up into it, but once the water's up in there, if the power runs out, you still have water because it's still pressurized because it's the source. Right. So its weight, that gravitational pull on it, gives it its pressure. Now, here's the thing, though, as that weight dissipates, because as those layers drop, the math, exponentially in reverse takes the weight off, so does the pressure. There's a mathematical correlation to that.
I'm sure you could hear the thing creak and moan as it starts to empty.
I don't know. I would assume.
I'm sure you would. If it's made of wood, it's made of wood and nails.
I would think it would creak and moan having all that water in it. It's like, oh man, my back right now. Oh, I can't hold it together. I just can't somebody let this water weight out of me.
But I guess what I was saying is it's amazing when you think about it. Like a Wild West town. that's a big feat for, I guess, the local blacksmith to take on when you think about how much man hours that's going to take.
Well, if you think about it, back then they didn't have anything to do but make food or shelter or things, so they just probably worked around the clock just making water tower.
Dude, I mean, we got to get this up first. I mean, this is infrastructure. That's more important than having buildings.
Well, but there's some truth in that.
Like, how do we?
The majority, because I've read a few books.
Honestly, how do you smelt more steel without having access to water, or how do you feed people? How do you?
Well, and I don't know the dates on this, but think about this. I mean, how old was the country when we finally realized what potable water was, and we weren't drinking grog and wine and ale because that's all we had for liquid. Which cracks me up, because nowadays we drink a couple of beers and whatever, and we get hangovers because we're dehydrated, right? That's what it is. We're dehydrated. We're not hungover. There's literally less liquid in our brain. The brain's separated from the skull, and that's the pain that you feel because it's not being suspended properly. Is this a new thing, or did basically everybody in the past just walk around hungover all freaking day, just half dehydrated?
Was it?
You know what I mean? Maybe that was a thing, and maybe that's why they had more open discussions, because they were just like, I want to take something off my mind throbbing right now. Give me another drink. Or did they just drink all day so they numbed it and they didn't care anymore? I mean, you also had opium back then and stuff too, so who knows?
Well, man, he just went off.
But think about that though, because you have to, we're talking about, but as you were saying, the first one is set up water, to finally have that part of the infrastructure. First ones to have like any kind of a banking system. So those towns typically are the ones that really started to pick up, because you had infrastructure, you had roads, you had water, good potable water, and you had money. People flocked to that because that's all you really needed back then.
Yeah, I'm thinking like little Wild West settler towns where the whole town was basically built up around the fact that there was bunch of gold in the stream down yonder.
Gold rush towns.
So it was just...
Yeah, I believe San Francisco was one of like the original gold rush towns kind of a thing. Like that was like one of the first cities to pop up because there were so many gold spots around it, or
the ingenuity and the not just that, but the sheer manpower you had to get together to pull something like that off. I mean, that's impressive. Like, wow.
That's brute force is, I think, a part of us getting to the whole hunter-gatherer component and started getting into the agricultural thing as we developed as a society. So having brute force, but now having intelligence and cognition of it to use it more wisely, to have machines use fulcrums and levers and all that fancy stuff so that you can amplify your power distribution, right? Having that large manpower, you can build a lot of stuff real quick. Especially back then. Impressive, like how they built the Empire State Building. Dude, they did that basically by hand. Dudes floating in the air, riveting steel together. That's insane.
I mean, you just brought up something else too, though. That the transition to, an agrarian society. And that in itself created a boom of technology as well. And interestingly enough, we can still trace back a lot of spiritual connection to gods based on the cow or the bull, being the main motif. And a lot of people like Terence McKenna would say that is a connection not only to the land and the animals, that that connection that we had to everything back then, being and especially being from a hunter-gatherer society.
Right.
You have a connection with the land that you hunt on. You have a connection with the animal that you're hunting, because you have to get into the spirit of that animal in a way. I mean, the Native Americans talked about it all the time. Like there was
Yeah, I equate it to Avatar. If you've seen the movie Avatar, that kind of a thing, where we all are one and we understand. Meaning that if this thing has given its life so that I can continue my life, I should have appreciation for it in that sense, as well as you have to be able to deal with your resources, because I mean that's really what we can call it. I mean, food supply, whether it be vegetable or animal, is a resource. The ability to sustain those resources for the populations that they had, there had to be that balance, right? They didn't take too much. They only took enough to support the family, and they never allowed the tribes to become too big. At least I don't think there's a ton of evidence out there that says that they would all have. That's why to me at least, that's why there's so many different tribes out there, because
nomadic tribes in general tended to stay very small. Because the fact
30,
they were
50, 100 people,
that's a pretty high number, actually.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. 30 people, sure, 50 maybe, but
probably max out around 20. Because trying to move because now you're talking about, okay, well, you have older women and you have children, like young children, maintaining any kind of speed across the land and being able to hunt and gather enough as you go. Like, that's tough going. So, in a lot of cases, they'd be even smaller than that. But there was a point at which it started to transition. And in the transitional stage, like Terence McKenna would say, that they started coming across the savannas and finding these grassy fields that were fed on by the local cattle, like the wild cattle.
Right.
And they noticed certain fungus were just popping up, just very prevalent. I mean, and just all over the place. You're talking about this magical spores. He would say this communication device brought to us by alien encounter. That's the kind of way that Terence McKenna would talk, because he said. Right. He said, if you think about it, there's something impressive about the spore of a mushroom and the way that it grows and the way that what the mitochondria, whatever the tiny
the microbial
microbes, the filaments that pass through the earth, they create an infrastructure, a communication web between, like a fungal network.
Well, right. Well, I mean,
they're literally plugged into the earth and able to communicate across miles upon miles.
I'll reference Avatar again, because you could see the one scene where the root system basically was, and that was to the knowledge and everything else. So
Who's the mushroom guy? Because I know we've talked about him before too. The guy that's more like anthropologic, like studies them, tries to find them in different locations. And he's all about all different types of mushrooms. And
I'm pretty sure I've seen an interview or a segment or two on him. I'm not recalling his name offhand.
This is starting to get pretty serious. We're probably going to start the show.
We're getting into the fact-checking components.
Right? Yeah, we may have to do that while we take a quick break. But
I can agree to that.
Like Terence McKenna would basically say that it was during this time where we started transitioning by finding a symbiosis with these animals that in some cases were actually eating those same mushrooms.
Right.
I mean, so this is a really strange connection now that you've had, because now you think about it, you now find yourself in a field, you've just eaten a mushroom off of poop from an animal.
You had to say the poop.
That's wildly grazing on this, this field of some kind of ancient grain of some sort, whatever it is that they found. And this is where you started having, they have these thoughts, well, maybe I can cultivate this kind of grain. Maybe I can live here amongst the animals. Maybe I can, and all this, he says, not just mushrooms, but hallucinogens in general, and he's very specific about the types of ones. He gets very chemical. He gets into the chemical.
Yeah, their physical names, like their actual compounds or whatever.
Yeah, they're chemical components. Right. Like he gets into that whole. and says he's very specific about which ones, but he says it's basically we can thank them for helping us find the consciousness that we enjoy today, basically. Like the knowing that you know, like we were saying, the I'm conscious that I am conscious, that I'm,
the cognizance of being cognizant.
I guess.
Yeah, being aware that you're aware.
Of a higher intelligence. I mean, because
I would just say being aware is being aware. Being aware that you're aware is
being aware that you're aware.
Because it simply embraces everything. All energies or entities. Whether it's science, religion, I don't care. At that point, it pretty much like engulfs all of it.
Well, I mean,
that's how I look at it.
You could easily go into the argument that, and I've heard this from other arguments like this, that you could argue that consciousness, if there's an experience that you could imagine it to be like, then that is consciousness. So if you can imagine what it is to be like a fly, like there's a certain flyness, like as simple as it is, maybe it's a tiny little ganglion, a very small bundle of nerves. That's all it is, and it's very reactionary, and but hey, there's a sort of consciousness there. It will get up out of your way and fly off if you try to swat it. There's an action-reaction equivalent within reality.
And I would. That's where I think that becomes a good point to converse about. Because to me, just because there's a reaction doesn't mean that it's conscious. So there's a difference of being there's a difference of being aware, and there's a difference of being aware that you are aware. And that's why I'm like, that to me is consciousness, because now it engulfs, encompasses all that idea where it's just like, okay, so you have this knowledge. Now what do you do with it? I don't know. Think about it. That's consciousness. So it's not even like, all right, I'm going to move away from this because I think I'm going to get swatted at or killed. It's now like, it would be the fly going, I could fly away, but instead I'm going to fly right at you because I can. That would be consciousness. So just reaction to me is not consciousness. When it makes a choice, when it takes from reaction and now my reaction says to do this, but I'm going to do this. That to me is when you start to get into consciousness.
And this is what's interesting, because like many people have like almost like the ego thing. Many people have a different personal viewpoint about what they think consciousness is.
Because none of us know.
Now what you're talking about is more like what I'm saying is like that. Conscious awareness is different. What I'm saying, conscious awareness is totally different from the consciousness that a dog has, or the consciousness that, like a dog can love another animal, a dog can love a human, right. A dog can show somewhat emotional reactions to situations.
They do. They do. Yeah, I agree. Dogs have emotions. I would say they have a conscious because they're not. And so while they may not even be aware that they're aware, they're just aware and they use it to react to it. So I mean, that's I just basically proved my own argument is incorrect because they aren't aware, but they are. So I don't even know if they have, because I almost feel that they are reactionary just off of the energies. Like that's just how they perceive things. That's why they see things before we do, or they literally see things that we don't see. They feel.
I mean, I would say like a big difference there, because you can look at an animal like a dog, or where I'd really have trouble actually having this argument is something like a dolphin or a whale, because what Tom's. Sorry, I shouldn't throw names around. Our friend says that, what is it? Is it dolphins have actually a much larger emotional center of their active center of their brain than the human being, like much larger. Like, and it's a very active center in there because it's linked directly, I think, with their communication.
What and so maybe that hey, we're gonna get into consciousness apparently. So let's
Well, we touched on it last. Anyway, you know what? I think we're getting to that point where we should probably take some notes on and take
down.
5.
Yeah, let's take a breather, reset, and then we'll
close the doors to the green room for a moment.
Yeah, let's break. We'll be back.